So we've had a little bit of breakfast, well, breakfast lunch, and now we're kind of driving around this coastal road. Now it's an area I haven't explored before, and that was one of the reasons for coming up, is to go and check this area out. And it's out towards Applecross, which is where the road goes way up over a pass. But the coastal road that runs round is supposed to be really, really nice. So we're following that road round, and we just stopped on the side of the road because, as you can see, we've got this beautiful scene in front of me here with this little red roof cottage. And then we've got the two trees, kind of almost everything's lined up. So you've got the cottage, one tree, and then another tree out on its own. A couple of things I don't like about the shot is that really I'd like to get a bit more height to separate the top of this tree from the background. In other words, the mountains and the coastline beyond. I'd like to get a little bit higher, but the problem with getting higher is then you start to need to point down looking on top of the roof rather than actually getting it more lined up. What I've actually done is line up the shot so I've got the cottage in the bottom right corner, and then the tree in the middle of the frame, and then the other tree is off to the left of the frame, so everything's kind of stacked. And then obviously we've got the sky, which isn't particularly interesting. We've got a lot of blue sky, but then there is these bands of white cloud running above, so that at least there's some interest there. And then as for the water, I'm not quite sure what to do yet. I'll probably experiment with that. I've taken a shot just normally, and then I might take a long exposure shot and see which one I prefer. Again, though, if I do take a long exposure, it's only going to be for the water. It's not going to be for the sky because there's not enough movement, there's not enough interest up there to make it worthwhile. But I'll get this camera set up so you can actually see what I'm looking at, and then I can walk you through it a little better. You see this 4:3 aspect ratio I've got lined up, and you'll see how I've stacked up these three elements in there. So you've got the cottage down in that bottom right, then you've got this little tree in the middle there, which looks like a lalande or something like that, and then you've got this other birch tree off to the left there, and it's a really nice shaped one. As I say, you can just see, if I move my focus point across, this tree here, you can just see it just overlaps the background there, but that's just one of those things I have to accept. There's no other way of getting around it if I want this shot, other than getting higher up behind me here. But then, as I said before, you're looking down on it rather than being more at a level with it. And I think it looks better to my eye from where we are now. So it's just one of those things I have to accept that it's just gonna have to be. And then obviously we've got a lot of sky up in the top frame there, but in the middle of the frame we've got all the mountain ranges running from the middle of the frame there, and I think that's really, really nice. And then above that, obviously the clouds in the sky, which are running in kind of bands above there. So at the moment, what I'm doing is I have my shutter speed at about a 50th of a second, f/16 ISO 100. And I'm just going to grab that shot now, about a stop under, because I'm just making sure that I get all of that detail and colour left in the sky and don't do anything to ruin that, basically. I haven't got that much directional light on the building. There is a little bit every now and then. We're getting a bit of light hits the building, which does help to kind of lift the scene. But I'm just grabbing shots as that happens. Then what I think I'll do is I've got that shot, and obviously we've got that kind of rough look, rough texture to the sea, and I'm not overly sure whether I like it. So I've come on a long trip and I'm not likely to come back. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I get all of that information so I can play with that information when I get back behind the computer at home. So what I'll make sure I do is to take a longer exposure for the water, so that if it doesn't really work to my eyes, I can blend them later in post. So that's what I'm going to do now. Pop a filter on and then take a shot for the water, and then I've got everything there. But I'm really liking the scene. I think it just works well, and it's one of those scenes that you kind of drive past and you just have to stop because you can see there's an image there. It's going to work. The one element I didn't like much about this shot is if you look down here, if I just point out, you can just see the edge of a shed sticking out. And that's something I'm probably going to have to clone out of the shot because there's no other way to get around it. It's sticking out the edge of the building and it does look a little bit distracting. I'll just have to see what I can do with that in post. But again, that's one of the limitations of this shot, it's where I can position myself, and there's nowhere else to really move, because if I just pan you around here, this is what I'm standing on. I'm basically standing on the edge of a small cliff, so there's nowhere to go. I can't go any further. I could only possibly go up, but as I say, if I go up, I'm going to end up shooting right down on top of the roof rather than looking across it, which is not something I really want to do. First, when it comes to composition, try using the rule of thirds and frame your shot with natural elements like trees or pathways. Leading lines can guide the viewer's eye, and don't forget to leave some negative space around your building to let the scene breathe. Lighting is key. For soft golden tones, shoot during golden hour or blue hour. On overcast days, you'll get even diffused lighting, and for mood, consider using backlighting for dramatic silhouettes. Experiment with perspective. A low angle can make a building look grand, while a higher vantage point helps show its scale in the landscape. Wide-angle lenses bring everything in, while telephoto lenses isolate the structure for a different effect. Make sure your building and landscape work together. Contrast modern buildings with nature for an eye-catching effect, and always think about scale and proportion. On the technical side, use a narrow depth of field for sharp details and a tripod to avoid any camera shake. Filters like polarizers can reduce reflections, and ND filters allow for stunning long exposures. Photography is about storytelling. Include people for scale, capture the building through different seasons, and research its history to give your images more context. Finally, in post-processing, enhance colours and contrast but keep it natural. Correct perspective distortion and sharpen those fine details to make your shots pop. So after having some lunch, we've popped out again, and this is a place we've passed 2 or 3 times on the way through, and I've passed before actually, and never actually made my way down. So as you can see, the light isn't great. We haven't got a lot of it. It's overcast, it's dull today. The sun is there, you can see it's trying to break through, but it's so thick, the cloud, that it's not actually coming through. But not letting that stop me, because obviously there's always a shot to be had. So what I'm doing is I've taken 2 images, one wide, so incorporating all these reeds in the foreground, and then doing a long exposure for the water, because obviously it's got a little bit of texture along the top. I've just tried to smooth that out to simplify everything. And then I've taken another one, which is a strip pano with that other little white cottage over there, kind of almost at the lower section of the frame. And then we've got the mountains obviously behind that. Now, as we get light coming down, I was hoping that the cottage would at least get a little bit of ambient light on it, but it seems to be actually reflecting into the water rather than doing that. So just playing around with it really. This is more for me a case of getting reference shots to come back to rather than making an image that I'm going to be truly happy with. But even when I'm taking reference shots, I try to get them the best I can, so that I know what is potentially there to come back to. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to take a couple of shots. I'll show you the wide one. I'll show you the cropped version, and then yeah, it's a reference shot to come back to.